I'm Elizabeth Davis, Executive Vice President and Provost at Baylor, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third in a series of symposia to celebrate the inaugural year of our President, Kenneth Winston Starr. Earlier this academic year, our President called us into a period of strategic planning, a time of contemplating how to carry out our grand tradition, pro ecclesia, pro texana, for the church, for the world. And let me add that he called all of us into this conversation. The room is full of folks from Baylor, but folks from the city, folks from education, sister educational institution I see, and President Johnette McCown, and so many others. And so we're all called into this conversation as Baylor goes into our strategic planning process. As we've begun the symposium series, it's been gratifying to see how the symposia are building on one another to inform our consideration of these matters. Our first speaker, Ken Elzinga, addressed Christian higher education versus Christians in higher education, speaking directly to Baylor's distinctive mission within the academy. Our second speaker, Jean Bethke Elstein, spoke on the sovereign self and liberal learning, warning that the freedom a liberal education delivers can't save us unless we exercise that freedom in a spirit of love, justice, and in relation to others. And today our speaker will, no doubt, challenge us to consider how we are to fulfill pro texana, speaking from a voice of experience and accomplishment. So it's my pleasure to ask Karla Leeper, Chief of Staff to the President and Professor of Communication Studies, to introduce our speaker to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. 2 years ago, I was at an ACE conference in Washington, D.C., and I was privileged to hear a panel of university chancellors talking about their university experience. And our speaker today was on that panel. And I came home and I walked directly into Elizabeth's office and I said, I'm not sure how, but we need to try to get Nancy Cantor to come to Baylor to talk. And I'm so excited that she was able to fit us in her busy schedule for the Presidential Symposium series. Dr. Cantor is the 11th Chancellor and President of Syracuse University. She is an accomplished scholar in her field of social psychology, earning numerous awards, a position as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and membership in the National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine, as well as the National Academy's Roundtable on Science and Technology for Sustainability. She is a significant figure in national conversations about the role of higher education in society. Prior appointments at Princeton, the University of Michigan, and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, in addition to leadership roles at the American Association of Higher Education and the American Council on Education, have provided her with the opportunity to challenge her colleagues in the Academy in discussions about how we might play a more intellectually entrepreneurial role in society. Syracuse's vision, Scholarship in Action, provides an excellent example of how a university can be a public good, collaborating with and serving the needs of society. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nancy Cantor to our campus.
Thank you all. It's really just wonderful to be here, and this is my first trip to Baylor, and I am just so impressed. I had a great time with the psychology students this morning, so it really feels good to be rubbing some elbows with psychologists again. So anyway, thank you so much. So at key points in our nation's history, we've turned to our colleges and universities to serve as engines for prosperity and agents of social mobility. This is such a moment. Times are hard, and we are called to help revive our economy and sustain our communities while opening our doors even wider to a whole generation of talented youth, the fast-growing population of students who will be first in their families to go to college, the sons and daughters of newly immigrated families, veterans returning from post-9/11 conflicts, and the students who are now often in under-resourced inner-city and rural schools. We must find ways to welcome them to our ranks. The challenge, as I would frame it, is to engage our students and faculty and staffs in creative work that is tuned to the world's most pressing issues as we as institutions become more innovative, effective, and valuable, as we become vital contributors to a newly thriving America. At the same time, to draw on the wise words of our neighbors in Syracuse, the Onondaga Nation, we must be ever vigilant for the well-being of the seventh generation yet to come. History shows that higher education can do this. Nearly 150 years ago, between the years Baylor and Syracuse were founded, when the Civil War threatened the very existence of our nation, we were challenged to tap the productivity of our land and the promise of the industrial age. President Lincoln had the foresight to see beyond the conflict and sign into law the Morrill Act, the landmark legislation creating our land-grant university system to conserve, encourage, and promote agriculture, which employed more than half the nation's population and deeply influenced its prosperity. Today, in many respects, we are again in such an era. This time, we are making a transition from an industrial to a knowledge economy. Once again, our nation and our world are challenged by conflicts and divisions. In our so-called flat, fully wired, and interconnected world, where nearly 70% of Americans live in metropolitan areas, there are thousands who are not connected at all, who are falling farther and farther behind in education, income, and employment. Simultaneously, the after effects of industry and overconsumption have given warning that our natural resources are fast becoming depleted. The sustainability of our water, energy, food, and land, all absolutely critical for our survival on this planet, unfortunately, have also become issues that have pitted whole groups, cultures, and religions against one another, as if we've forgotten how to raise a barn together. Against this fraught backdrop, and with an eye on that seventh generation yet to come, it's imperative that great institutions roll up their sleeves and get to the world's work. If not, we should rightly be criticized for breaking our social compact, whether we are private or public, religiously affiliated or not. As President Starr wrote recently in the journal First Things, and I quote, "All too often the modern academy appears as something smugly remote and arrogantly aloof from the people who support and sustain it. We cannot afford, nor should we want, to be tarred with that description. And in very deep ways, it would be inconsistent with the legacies of commitment to public engagement at both of our institutions. In the case of Syracuse, for example, World War II was a defining moment for our institutional identity. Overnight, we literally tripled our enrollment to welcome returning veterans on the GI Bill. Today, we still proudly embrace our veterans and support their road to opportunity, breaking new ground with our award-winning Entrepreneurs Boot Camp for veterans with disabilities that has expanded to include 5 other universities from Connecticut to California. Baylor's touchstone is ensconced in your motto, Pro Ecclesia, followed by Pro Texicana. Your passionate embrace of faith serves as a motivator for public service, a tradition with roots in your very founding. It's a living legacy as expressed by the desires of nearly 1/3 of first-year Baylor students to pursue careers in healthcare, as President Starr proudly described in his essay on the soul of a college. Syracuse and Baylor are both private research universities, as we all know, but ones that are acutely aware of their responsibility to serve the public good. A modern research university can and should go beyond its boundaries to tackle messy, intractable problems that are best addressed through many disciplines with many partners on campus and off. Education, side by side with research embedded in our rich array of academic disciplines, can make a huge impact in partnerships of all kinds with our many communities. So today, I will concentrate on Syracuse, on what's happening in Syracuse, but I hope that you will find it rings a bell for Baylor, too. In Syracuse, where the city's population has been moving to the suburbs for the last 50 years, SU is a critical anchor institution in turning our community around. We see quite directly how important the public mission of higher education can be to a prosperous future. We are deeply engaged with local issues that resonate globally, from environmental sustainability to urban education, working with many partners and creating what we call third spaces of interaction, built around major projects that engage faculty and students by intertwining learning, scholarship, and civic engagement. We call this vision Scholarship in Action. One such third space in our city's near west side, with its iconic centerpiece, St. Lucy's Church, welcoming all sinners and saints alike to this beleaguered but deeply soulful neighborhood. This was once a thriving district of factories, rail yards, and housing where people could walk to work. One factory had more than 2,000 employees and not one place to park, the dream of every college president. It was one of the neighborhoods hardest hit during the city's industrial decline. The near west side now includes the second poorest cluster of census tracts in the nation. It's a multi-ethnic and multiracial community with enormous human potential, despite the profound challenges that arise from the deep chasms that divide our society and our world. On the near west side, 50% of the 3,300 residents live below the poverty level, 40% are unemployed, and 37% consider themselves to have one or more disabilities. Over the years, as housing vacancies went up and property values went down, the dilapidated properties in this neighborhood were snapped up by slum landlords who collected rents that rarely made repairs. Many of them live out of town where they don't have to see the landscape they've made. 152 vacant parcels of land and 83 vacant structures in an area of less than a third of a square mile. Several years ago, SU joined with foundations, businesses, not-for-profits, state and city governments, virtually with anybody who would come to the table, and most importantly, neighborhood residents, from grandmothers with the wisdom of the ages to the deeply committed priest of St. Lucy's, to the youth who will ultimately save this neighborhood. Together, they created a nonprofit organization, the Near West Side Initiative, as an exciting and, we hope, deeply democratic partnership that embeds the arts, technology, and design with other fields: architecture, entrepreneurship, law, education, environmental engineering, public health, and public communications, to name really only a few, as catalysts for change. Change of the kind our design students imagined when they positioned a child of the community drawing her own future on the side of an old warehouse. The Near West Side Initiative is helping to draw that future, and not by seeking to gentrify the neighborhood, which ultimately merely sweeps problems under the rug, but by transforming the neighborhood from the inside out with the community residents at the table. And we have multiple nonprofit partners who've long worked with residents to address housing issues piece by piece. Their collective action, connected to the efforts of many others, is producing results that have truly transformative potential. Home Headquarters, a not-for-profit organization, has acquired 103 residential parcels within this target area, and to date has rehabilitated 13 properties, constructed 7 new green residences on vacant properties, and marketed and sold 5 vacant dilapidated properties for $1 each to each new homeowner. Christopher Community has built 60 new affordable rental properties, and Habitat for Humanity has constructed 9 new homes since the initiative began. For our part, SU is leveraging some long-standing strengths to make residential and commercial buildings in the neighborhood more sustainable. For example, our School of Architecture teamed up with our green technologists to conduct an extraordinary international competition to create cutting-edge green single-family homes designed specifically for sites on the Near West Side. 3 of the winning designs have been constructed and are near completion. Even in our frigid, snowy winters, and this is not idle chatter, we have 2 feet of snow on the ground today, one of these homes is so well insulated it can be heated with the energy it would take to run a hairdryer. All told, since the inception of the Near West Side Initiative, the neighborhood has seen more than $12 million in residential property acquisition, rehabilitation, and new construction, providing families housing options that are safe and affordable and energy efficient, which again is no small thing in our climate. These efforts have stimulated very encouraging economic activity. 2 of the warehouses being redeveloped are drawing artists and arts-based businesses and nonprofits to the neighborhood, including Pro-Literacy, the world's largest literacy organization with 135 employees, and our regional public television affiliate, WCNY, is moving in with 80 employees. New York State's oldest architectural firm, a bookstore, a recording studio, a coffee shop, a fitness center, and a bakery have all been attracted to the neighborhood over the past 2 years. To create wealth that is rooted in the neighborhood, 2 resident-owned cooperatives are being launched. A high-tech hydroponic greenhouse that will grow and sell fresh vegetables, and a green property management company to maintain nearly 300,000 square feet of mixed-use properties owned and operated now by the Near West Side Initiative. These properties are both commercial and residential, and the new co-op will use environmentally sound practices and products to keep them up. Now, at this point, you might well say, that's great for the city, the neighborhood, and the residents, but it sounds a lot like the traditional economic development that universities have long sought for their communities. What does it do for higher education at the university? Well, the answer is a lot. Third spaces like the Near West Side give our faculty and students unparalleled opportunities for cutting-edge research and for creativity that really matters. Scholarship in Action is, in fact, a two-way street of reciprocal engagement that traverses our campus and community. To give you one example, the green technologists I referred to before who are involved in the neighborhood are from the Syracuse Center of Excellence in Environmental and Energy Systems. SU hosts this center, but its assets are distributed among 12 core universities and research institutes, industry partners across our region, and government agencies at all levels. All of them have a second home, if you will, and for some a first home, in the new state-of-the-art facility recently erected for the center on a remediated brownfield site in downtown Syracuse. Many years ago, this was the site right near the Erie Canal of the Smith Typewriter Company, before it became Smith Corona, producing the typewriters that were a staple of every business office until computers made them obsolete. So we went from that brownfield site to this incredible test bed and laboratory, the Center of Excellence. The regional federation approach to environmental issues that the Center of Excellence is taking allows us to assemble entrepreneurial, agile, cross-sector, cross-disciplinary teams to take on sustainability problems wherever they arise. We find ourselves breaking down academic and organizational silos, both through necessity and the interests of our partners, because solving complex environmental problems demands this kind of broad collaboration. Crucially, this opens up the process for setting the research agenda and for integrating the perspectives and interests of public, private, and nonprofit partners. In partnership with the Near West Side Initiative, the Center of Excellence has an extraordinary, if you will, real-world test bed for energy-efficient building innovations at every stage, from research and development to demonstration, commercialization, and deployment. For example, we've conducted a federally funded study that documents the impact of poor housing conditions locally on childhood asthma incidents. We've also funded research that has resulted in the development of air purification systems that dramatically reduce childhood asthma. The center worked with U.S. Green Bill to prototype what a whole neighborhood LEED certification system could look like, including a green retrofit plan for housing. It also is working in partnership with the EPA, the local utility, National Grid, and home headquarters to conduct free energy audits of existing businesses and homes. The goal is to identify affordable, energy efficiency upgrades for commercial and residential buildings, and then help owners apply for financing to get them done. We've also overseen the complete green renovation of a 4-story warehouse that includes a geothermal field, solar panels, hot water on demand, an innovative living wall screen over parts of the building, as well as rainwater recycling capacity. And again, just as an aside, this is tremendously important when you're in a geographic setting like we are in Syracuse, where, for example, it snows a lot and there's rainwater all the time that could be recycled. In fact, we're now leading an effort to scale up the impact of this kind of cross-sector collaboration across all of New York State, drawing in numerous other partners connected all along the value chain of energy efficiency building systems. We intend to form a massive New York Energy Regional Innovation Cluster that can unite the R&D and manufacturing capacity located in upstate New York with one of the world's largest real estate markets, downstate New York, of course, including New York City. So you can see why our scientists, engineers, architects, designers, real estate economists, public policy experts are excited about the incredibly fertile ground for research, the collaborative laboratory that we're cultivating. And it has all started right in our neighborhood with our many partners, where our faculty can see what the work they're doing locally in Syracuse resonates powerfully both with their academic fields and with across communities around the world. At research universities like Baylor and Syracuse, where we have worked hard to integrate excellent research with superb teaching, we know we must seize every opportunity to bring our students into our laboratories on campus. Likewise, it is absolutely essential to realize that the laboratories we've created with our community partners also constitute optimal learning environments for our students, where they can do what we call preparing for the world in the world. As you might imagine, the opportunities for teaching, learning, and research that we find in community contexts like the Near West Side extend across the full range of disciplines and take many forms. Professor Marion Wilson, a sculptor who is director of community initiatives actually in our School of Education, has been using the Near West Side as a studio for what she calls social sculpture. That is the notion that sculpture is not only object making, but it can also be thought, experience, and how we mold and shape the world. With a cross-disciplinary team of faculty and students from the arts, humanities, education, ecology, and business management, Professor Wilson is spearheading a project to transform a former drug house across the street from an elementary school from a menace to a promise. The 2-story house is stripped down to the studs and then being reimagined and rebuilt with recycled materials, of course, by an academically diverse team over a period of 3 semesters, an effort that requires both community support and planning permission from city officials. As Professor Wilson told the zoning officials, the work at 601 Tully will make it less of an object than a living thing that changes the way we live. That change started with the zoning meeting itself, which was jammed by so many students, faculty members, and community partners, including a high school student who gave a long and impassioned speech in favor of the project, that the chair of the Planning Commission was moved to remark, "We're not used to having big crowds like this. We hope you enjoy yourselves." The structure of 601 Tully will feature a Center for Arts Education, a place where faculty member and photographer Steve Mahan can teach both SU students and high school students together in his pioneering course on photography and literacy. As he says, and I quote, "We're going in and using photography as a storytelling device. You can tell a story without being able to read on a certain level or write on a certain level. English doesn't have to be your first language. You might have Asperger's, autism, a learning disability, whatever you want to call it. Instantly, right off the bat, the camera seems to level that playing field." For Syracuse University students, courses like these taught in community and with students from the city schools become an eye-opening opportunity to be both expert and novice, teacher and learner, all in one experience, as they and their school district peers each find their vision and voice. The plan for 601 Tully is to house a coffee shop and bookstore run by students from the Business Academy at nearby Fowler High School. So this piece of social sculpture will also become a place to cultivate entrepreneurs. In a parallel project, one of our communications design classes spent the entire spring semester last year creating designs, from banners on the street to maps for visitors, to help the community visually mark the identity of the Near West Side neighborhood and the district closest to the school and to downtown as the SALT District, the Syracuse Art, Literacy, and Technology District. As I was telling some folks this morning, Syracuse was the center of the salt industry, so this is an appropriate taking of it, if you will, of the name. So our students, many of them from the suburbs, became fascinated by the large number of ugly fences they saw here, some of them enclosing large, empty lots for no purpose that was obvious to anyone. What does a fence mean? They asked each other. Would it be possible to make fences like these beautiful rather than intimidating? They researched and proposed a number of designs, and last summer, one of the students, Stephanie Hart, a junior from Keene, New Hampshire, spent the whole summer working on it as an intern without pay. She consulted with community groups on the design and then worked with local children and youth to snap 6,000 colored pieces of plastic into 11 sections of the 6-foot anchor fence around Skiddy Park, the playground on the other side of the street from 601 Tully, where several major murders have occurred in the past. Each day, she walked over to the park from downtown with a cart carrying 50-pound boxes of diamond-shaped plastic inserts, small enough to snap into the openings in the fence. As the design progressed, some of it changed by the kids who wanted things added, like flowers, for example. A few passerbys told Stephanie they thought the pieces would be popped out again before morning. But residents of the community liked it, and over the months, the design on the fence has survived. And I might add, every time, which is frequent, I go to the Near West Side, some resident will tell me, "Did you see the latest design on the Skiddy Park fence?" So it's really become a kind of gathering place, totally changed from what it was. And Stephanie says, "I'm definitely more comfortable in the neighborhood. I have a lot more connections than I did before the summer started. I have an idea of what it takes to do community work, how many people you have to talk to before you get things approved, how much money things cost, and how much money we don't have to do those things." And speaking of resources, these experiences on the Near West Side translate into critical lessons about entrepreneurship for students, faculty, and neighborhood residents alike. Seemingly simple interactions can spark insights into what it takes to grow entrepreneurship in our city and in others like us that are remaking themselves to compete in what Bruce Katz often refers to as the next economy, one in which America must become low carbon and once again innovation-driven and export-oriented. If we're going to thrive in that economy, we need to grow a lot more entrepreneurs in our metropolitan areas. As part of this effort, we created a business incubator in the center of Syracuse's long underserved South Side. Our South Side Innovation Center provides office space and business support for startup businesses and budding entrepreneurs, sharing common costs and equipment to reduce the expenses incurred in starting new businesses. We're helping entrepreneurs forge links with one another through the recently incorporated Southside Entrepreneurs Association, for example. We're connecting them with resources for their businesses, investors, talent, customers, and markets. We're also introducing them to the nonprofits, public sector organizations, and social service agencies geared toward building an entrepreneurial culture. SU has put its intellectual capital on the table through faculty-run educational programs and student consulting teams that help entrepreneurs who are already up and running hone their business plans. We're starting to see incredible results from this. In just 3 years, the Innovation Center has touched literally thousands of people through conferences and training programs. It's launched 77 new businesses and helped more than 550 existing businesses better tune their operations to their markets. It's created 72 local jobs and retained another 133. One of the latest success stories is that of the East Environmental Group, LLC, a local minority-owned business founded by Shawan East. They specialize in the abatement of hazardous air and building materials. From 1 employee, they've already grown to 5, bought 2 other companies, and opened a second office in Binghamton, another upstate city. Another new company, Blue Tree Studios, owned by local resident Christiana Kaiser, specializes in West African imports and foods that are now stocked by 50 stores. She, too, has opened up a second office. The Southside Innovation Center also includes a community test kitchen to help local food entrepreneurs. One of these we're particularly proud of, Stacy Van Wolick, hit the road to stardom with her business Promise Me Chocolate that makes edible gems from chocolate. Her chocolates made Oprah's O List for the 2009 holiday season, so if you see them, please buy them, and was featured by Martha Stewart in her wedding magazine. We're also taking these successes in the community back to campus, along the two-way street of scholarship and action, because we know we have a lot to learn about cultivating our own entrepreneurs. And with an entrepreneurship program as strong as you have here at Baylor, you know exactly what I mean. We're doing this through a university-wide program to infuse the entrepreneurial spirit across the curriculum, and this is entrepreneurship writ large. Extending beyond traditional notions of honing one's business acumen, we're empowering faculty, students, and professionals of all stripes to activate their intellectual capital, share it generously with others, collaborate with communities of experts, and make a difference in the world by launching new ventures, specifically in our city and region. The E-initiative, as we call it, is leveraged by a 5-year, $3 million grant from the Kaufman Foundation to pool expertise across 6 public and private institutions, businesses, and not-for-profits in central New York. The goal is to use the experience of successful venture capitalists and entrepreneurs to mentor the next generation. So far, the results, again, are pretty promising. Over the first 3 years, we've supported more than 150 projects. We've more than tripled enrollment in entrepreneurship courses across our partner institutions from 1,900 to 6,600. And our student sandbox, and this is the thing we're most excited about, a business incubator, is bursting at the seams with, right now, in residence, 15 student startups and many more to come. One of these is called brandyourself.com. It empowers subscribers to manage the many and sometimes unwieldy aspects of their online presence, a tool that we found so practical for newly minted college graduates that we gave subscriptions as a graduation gift to our entire class of 2010. We feel it would be invaluable as they enter a job market where the virtual and physical worlds increasingly intersect. Our expansive vision of entrepreneurship encompasses more than our business community. The idea is to reinforce and help sustain the tremendous social capital in the community through entrepreneurship. You can already see progress on the South Side. As we were building the physical infrastructure for economic entrepreneurship, we were facilitating the emergence of an independent, community-based organization of neighborhood leaders. We asked this group, the Southside Community Coalition, to identify and prioritize projects they consider essential to turning the neighborhood around. We also asked them to suggest a social infrastructure that can sustain economic development and community-wide revitalization. The coalition compiled a formal request for proposals to Syracuse University faculty to take on their highest priority projects. We, in turn, identified faculty members and students with the right expertise to partner with community members in these efforts. As a result, the variety of projects now underway speaks both to the coalition's thoughtful and visionary leadership and to the breadth of interests among SU faculty to share what they know with and learn from the local community. For example, access to affordable fresh produce has long been an issue in this neighborhood that major grocery stores have utterly avoided. Our own scholarship over the years has shown that poor nutrition, the result of buying food from small corner stores that stock mostly liquor, lottery tickets, and no fresh vegetables or fruit, has been a key factor in high rates of infant mortality in this neighborhood. So the Southside Community Coalition and Syracuse faculty have now collaborated to sponsor a farmers market held seasonally in a centrally located parking lot in the heart of the South Side. Plans are in place for a permanent home for a locally owned food co-op. We've been involved in health initiatives in this community actually for several years through the award-winning Genesis Health Project Network, a community-designed and culturally sensitive collaboration with the pastors and congregations of 10 inner-city Black churches with more than 3,000 members. Working with lay health advocates and local medical institutions, the Genesis Network meets residents where they live, for example, at the barber shop and in churches, and provides education to reduce health disparities, obesity, and to promote healthy lifestyles among African Americans in low-income areas of the city. Preserving the histories of families and social institutions also was identified as a key concern by neighborhood residents. So we've assembled a team of SU students and faculty spanning library sciences, museum studies, and communication and rhetorical studies to train residents to preserve cultural artifacts. Together, they created a documentary film about the history of the neighborhood, which was and is predominantly African American, and we established a mechanism for training future generations to preserve their past, our present, creating a certificate program in the preservation of cultural heritage. And as we know, the news coming out of historically disempowered neighborhoods like the South Side is too often told from the perspective of people on the outside. So we're empowering the insiders, the residents, to report their news from their perspective, as faculty and students from our Newhouse School of Public Communications have partnered with the residents to create a print and online community newspaper called The Stand. Speaking of the news, as we're all aware, the state of urban schools has not been encouraging. Nationally, we see growing gaps in educational attainment between the public schools in our cities and our suburbs. High school students from low-income families are dropping out of schools at 6 times the rate of high-income peers. The math achievement of African American and Latino American 17-year-olds is trailing that of white students, and many bright but poor children are not receiving the encouragement and advice they need to pursue college. We've seen these trends play out locally in Syracuse across not only the near west side and the south side, but all the neighborhoods in the district, where 71% of Syracuse City School District students are from minority groups, 75% receive free or reduced price lunches, and less than 50% of the students entering kindergarten graduate high school 13 years later. Knowing that our city, indeed the hope of cities like it all over America, rests on our ability to alter dramatically this picture, Syracuse University and the City School District have undertaken a precedent-setting project in partnership with the Say Yes to Education Foundation. Together, we aim to alter, and this sounds a bit ambitious, but we believe it, we aim to alter the life course of students throughout our city by dramatically increasing the rate at which they attend college. Building on the Foundation's track record of remarkable success in several urban schools in Harlem, Philadelphia, Hartford, Connecticut, and Cambridge, Mass., we're scaling up the Say Yes model for the first time to the level of an entire school district. We emphasize that the persistent and well-documented achievement gap between urban students and their suburban peers is not an accurate measure of ability or potential, but is actually an opportunity gap. Too many urban students have not had the opportunity to take full advantage of the academic and social supports that their more privileged peers have, experiences that lead to success, we all know, in higher education. This gap shows up not only in grades, but also in standardized test scores, course selection, dropout rates, access to curriculum, and quality instruction. We see the results in high school graduation rates and the differential in college admissions and college completion rates. Say Yes to Education Syracuse seeks to close the opportunity gap by providing crucial, comprehensive support to the 21,000 students in the city's public schools and their families. We're addressing many of the academic, health, social, emotional, and legal issues that so often act as insurmountable roadblocks to inner-city youth on the path to college. This is absolutely, again, a cross-sector collaboration. Onondaga Community College, Syracuse University, and many others are involved in this. Perhaps most importantly, it helps students to overcome one of the biggest barriers of all, the cost of higher education. Through the Say Yes Higher Education Compact, Syracuse City School District students have access to tuition scholarship support at 24 private institutions, of course, including Syracuse, and SUNY, and all of State University of New York and City University of New York. And we've sent already 1,000 students to college through Say Yes in the last 2 years. To date, we've rolled out our comprehensive program in 3 of the city's 4 quadrants, with after-school programs at 18 schools and an academically oriented summer camp attended by 1,600 students this past summer. And those are kindergarten through 3rd grade students. We've dramatically reduced caseloads for school social workers. 5 private law firms and 5 nonprofits, including our law clinics, are providing free legal assistance to district families, and we're piloting a health insurance program. Because we know that the prosperity of our city is at stake, we're very encouraged by the early indicators of the sweeping impact of Say Yes. We've seen enrollment in the city schools increase for the first time in a decade by 300 this fall, which tells us that parents are choosing to move or keep their children in city schools. And by the way, when people say to me, how do you know that what SU is doing is working? I point to 2 things. One, the crane that for the first time in 60 years built a building in the near west side, and 2, the 300 students who've moved into or remained in the Syracuse City School District. We've seen median home sale values increase by 3.5%, even with a persistently sluggish real estate market. And we've already seen the dropout rate for 9th grade fall over the past 2 years. These are early signs, but they are early signs of progress. And we believe they're a bellwether of the more transformative influence yet to come, as all of the educational and family supports take root and the community begins to really believe that all of our city children can thrive on a path toward post-secondary education. Transformation, that's our aim for Say Yes, and in fact, for all the projects we're undertaking under the banner of Scholarship in Action. We're looking to transform the world, and because this is a two-way street, we're also looking to transform ourselves. Scholarship in Action has enriched our thinking about our students and how they learn. It has inspired and excited members of our faculty who found expansive opportunities for research and creative work while creating optimal learning environments. It's expanded our criteria for rewarding excellence among our faculty, as we've embedded structures for public scholarship in our tenure and promotion guidelines. And it has profoundly changed our relationship with the world through reciprocal partnerships that bring us to the world and the world to us. The work, however, is not easy. When we are challenged to see through the eyes of others, as we are so frequently and poignantly by children, we often are forced to confront inequities or unevenness, in the words of this Syracuse elementary schooler's photo poem, that we didn't see before. But we should not be surprised that the work is not easy, and we, like the Baylor community, are ready to roll up our institutional sleeves and try to make a difference in our world. For though Syracuse's institutional history and geography may lie on a different path than Baylor's, I suspect that when we face these challenges, these unevennesses, these inequities, We sometimes find inspiration in the same places. I know that I often find it in the words of a famous Baptist, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who eloquently described the dissatisfaction with the status quo. For King, as you know, it was divine dissatisfaction that in some important ways captures the underlying motivation that led so many of us in academia to the path we are on. As we think today about the challenges we face in transforming our academic communities and working for justice and prosperity in the communities where we are situated, as well as our nation and our world, Dr. King's rallying cry rings out as loud and clear as it did more than 40 years ago when he said, and I quote, "Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort from the inner city of poverty and despair shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Let us be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family will live in a decent sanitary home. Let us be dissatisfied until the dark yesterdays of segregated schools will be transformed into bright tomorrows of quality integrated education. There will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. But difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with a faith in the future." End quote. It is that faith in the future that comes so readily, I find, when universities, whether private like ours or public like the great land-grant institutions that Lincoln first chartered, accept the challenges and the opportunities of our public missions, engaging with our communities in scholarship and education from New York to Texas, today and in the years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, you're going to use up all the Q&A time. No, this was fabulous, and as we expected, a great challenge for Baylor that you have put there before us. So we have some time, and what I'm going to do is let Chancellor Cantor kind of moderate her own Q&A. So if you can raise your hand, it's a little dark, although we might try to catch the lights and let them start working. And we have people with mics out there, so they'll go to whoever is ready to ask you questions.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cantor. I was just wondering a little bit more about Say Yes for Education. What is this initiative doing directly with the students in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, really directly hands-on? Is that students or faculty, community partners?
Yep. Yeah, so let me give you some detail about the program. So Say Yes to Education has a model of action and of change for schools that involves, first of all, taking the curriculum, so entirely revising the curriculum. And I should say this has been done totally in collaboration with the Syracuse City School District and the teachers' union. So they renegotiated their contract for extended day and extended year. So we've had incredible collaboration, and I think that's critical. Our faculty and students are in with teachers in the city school district doing before school and after school mentoring, tutoring, in and around a whole curriculum revision. So that's the academic piece. Community-based organizations like the Boys and Girls Club do the after-school program, and then we, in collaboration with them, do the summer camp, which is a very important piece of this for elementary school kids. We started in the academic work specifically in the elementary school and are working our way up through K through 12. The second big piece is really the socio-emotional piece. So in the City of Syracuse district, there was a ratio of 1 caseworker to 526 kids. I mean, you can't make progress in a low-resource district on anything like that scale. So the first thing we did was divert resources both from Say Yes and from us and from the district to get that ratio down to 1 to 200, which still may sound large, but it's an enormous difference. Our School of Social Work is involved, so we try to always take the model of embedding our faculty and students within the professionals who are working on the ground in the district. And the district has so opened itself up to this that makes all the difference. Then in terms of physical health, actually, Onondaga County runs the social services. So Onondaga County Mental Health Commissioner and Physical Health Commissioner jointly run a task force now that includes our folks, but also people from all across social service agencies across the city to really try to bring a comprehensive, holistic health approach to these children in the schools. So one of the keys is never making people have the school be a center of community, never make people go outside. The legal side of it is very critical because kids just simply don't show up to school if their families have just been evicted, for example. And so the legal clinics, where again we match our legal clinics with law firms in the area, we have 18, I think now, legal clinics in schools throughout the city. So I always have to do this. And then financial aid. The biggest piece of the college scholarships, and it's very interesting, there are a number of programs around the country, the Hope Scholarship Program in Georgia, the Kalamazoo Promise in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that promise college scholarships, but you find that a very few inner city and rural kids can actually take advantage of it, because if you've ever tried to fill out a FAFSA form or anything remotely like it, you will never do that if you don't have somebody to walk through it. So starting in middle school, we start in kindergarten with the notion that you can go to college. And then in middle school, we start financial aid workshops with students and families so that they're both taking a curricular path that will get them either through the community college and up to a four-year institution or actual financial aid workshops that also take them through. And then in high school, we have these learning academies as part of Say Yes that really sit side by side, and our financial aid experts go in and do workshops. And then especially the other private institutions that we recruited to this, and they're all across New York State and Pennsylvania and Connecticut, and we bring them to the table for these financial aid workshops as well. And because one of the saddest things is the amount of disbelief in these districts that on the part of students and families and teachers and counselors that their kids can either thrive in college of any sort or actually get there and afford it. So we're seeing that as a big promise of this, and I think we're beginning. As I said, we've already sent 1,000 kids, and that's without the academic supports that are in place. That's simply by promising the scholarships.
Hi, I'm Jacob Murray. I'm an entrepreneurship student here at Baylor.
Great.
And I appreciate you talking about your
Congratulations on your
program.
ranking.
Thank you. I'm curious as to how you and the team that you have working with you cast this conversation and initially engaged the students at Syracuse to really engage in the community conversation as a whole.
Yeah, well, in the entrepreneurship program, it came quite naturally, actually, in part because the faculty were so involved in the Southside Innovation Center and in figuring out how you really do the right business plans and connect the right expertise. But then also because we started, at the same time as we started doing this work, we started a student and free enterprise, a SIFE. I don't know if you have a SIFE organization as part of Baylor, but in SIFE, they create teams of students who go out all around the community and do these kinds of projects. And the nice thing about the SIFE program is that it's from across campus, so it's not just business school rooted. And then we got the Kaufman grant, and that really jump-started the idea that students who were in visual and performing arts, in graphic design, for example, could get interested in entrepreneurship. That students in the Newhouse School of Communications, I mean, if ever there's an industry that needs entrepreneurship, it's that one, right? And so we could get them interested. And the critical connective tissue with the community is that it's very clear in these living classrooms, as I call them, really in the community, that all of the things that are critical to understanding how entrepreneurship takes root are very vividly in front of you, sometimes in harsh terms, when you're dealing with a community-based entrepreneurship move. And then in terms of the student sandbox, that really became, I think, our most exciting core thing, which is, so we started a curriculum as part of Kaufman that we call What's the Big Idea? So it's a 2-semester series of courses where students from all over campus take this course and think about, what's the big idea? What can you? Then the second semester of the course is really beginning to weed out are any of these doable? Could you do any kind of seed funding that would really make a difference? And then they spend the summer in this Syracuse Technology Garden downtown, in a student sandbox, and it's one of the most exciting places to go to because the sparks are just flying. And then we bring venture capitalists in to try to get them interested, and that's for upstate New York the biggest trick is how to get the downstate venture capitalists to be interested in coming. But the brandyourself.com kids, for example, I call them kids, but students. I have breakfast with them all the time, and they report on their newest seed fund that they got, and they're building it, and it's been great. So I think it almost goes without saying that the entrepreneurial spirit of the students really comes out in these community projects, and they love them. So it's been oversubscribed. We've actually had to really kind of try to pull back a little to have space. Yeah.
I wonder if you could say a word or two about the administrative structure that keeps this kind of activity efficient and functioning.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
So I like to refer to this as the most top-down, bottom-up thing I've ever done in my life. It is, on the one hand, all of these projects have central investment, substantial central investment. Not always financial resources, by the way, but human capital, for example. So we will take people on loan from my office or from the provost's office to spend, a semester at the sandbox or so it's not always direct financial investment, although some of it is direct financial investment. But without the on-the-ground community partners, the thing would never work. And so what I say to people is, look, we're going to let 1,000 flowers bloom. You can do 1 million service learning projects. You can do volunteerism. You can work in the community. But that is different than these big projects. So these big projects, we require a couple of things. One, we have literally a set of criteria for our investment. One is that we're good at it, that it's something Syracuse University is actually good at doing. Because if it's a one-shot thing dependent on one faculty member who's interested, we won't sustain the engagement and we'll just disappoint people in the end. So one, it has to play to our academic strengths, so we know that there'll be a history and a sustainability with it. Two, I require that there be other cross-sector partners, so that it isn't SU only maintaining this. And I think that's a very important administrative thing. So when we did the Near West Side, we jump-started the Near West Side by convincing New York State in its height of dysfunctional government to allow us to divert a $13.8 million loan payback that Syracuse was doing for a building the state had given money 2 years before. We were just sending $13.8 million into the abyss of Albany, and that didn't feel very good. And so we convinced our local state senator, John DeFrancisco, to go to Albany with us and to say, look, we'll keep paying the $13.8 million, but can we pay it to the Near West Side Initiative to create an artist, technology, design, revitalization, and economic development plan in that district to buy those big warehouses and do that? Now, when we did that, we faced, and they said yes, amazingly. We faced a real choice point. We could have made that an SU project, right? It was our funds. We could have made it. We purposely didn't. We purposely created that 501c3 with all kinds of cross-sector partners at the table because we knew that $13.8 million, one, wasn't going to go very far, and two, that there were going to be lots of other projects that were coming up that needed partners if this thing was really going to take off. So I think the cross-sector partnership part is very important. Another feature that is extremely important, and we were talking about this earlier, is that you need to get some system of reward for faculty, and for students for that matter, but students kind of get it more naturally in some ways, but some system of reward for faculty, that this work is valuable scholarship and that they will be rewarded for engaging in it. So that may not be the kind of administrative structure you're thinking of, but it actually is a critical administrative aid to it. So we have a senior associate provost who spends a lot of time negotiating memorandum of understanding across departments, especially for junior faculty, about the ways in which this work will count, and who will evaluate it. Who's the peer for evaluating a green home designed by a faculty member and a set of students in architecture? I mean, architecture is a no-brainer because that's the work they do and they get that scholarship. But you can imagine in other departments that's less obvious. And so that was very critical. I would say those are the main things. We have not done what some places have done. We don't have a single office that is responsible for every one of these. We kind of embed them as much as possible in the relevant school or college. The exception to that is the Near West Side, where we have a vice president for community engagement and economic development because it's such a complicated, expansive project, and we really needed someone who understood everything from codes to how you put in for COPSI grants and talk to HUD and things like that. But we've not layered much administrative infrastructure around it, much actually to the dismay of many of my colleagues.
Ms. Cantor, this is Virginia Dupuy. Does somebody else have another mic about to speak? Hello.
Sorry.
Hello again. First of all, I want to thank you for coming to Waco and to congratulate you on the extraordinary work that you're doing. In fact, I feel this kinship with what you're doing, that with what we're trying to do here, and I've not found another city. Maybe there are many who are doing that, but I've just not heard of such extraordinary work within a city and within a community. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, and I know your Educational Alliance is extraordinary. So,
well, and I would like for you to talk a little bit more about how you developed this partnership with the schools themselves. I think that might be helpful and instructive. Like, did your School of Education get involved, or help us walk through that picture?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. So the history of the educational identity at Syracuse was that our School of Education has been deeply involved for decades in inclusive education. So in creating schools of promise and inclusive education. We were the pioneers who went around New York State to various institutions where students with children with developmental disabilities were being really imprisoned in some ways, and led to the Willowbrook consent decree in New York State that released students. But what we saw then and this is, of course, way before I got there, but what we saw then was that the necessity, once upon release, was that you do something to partner with community to make sure that there was a place for students. So a lot of our relationship to the city school district comes from having been a very close partner on issues of inclusion and disabilities. As you know, so many inner city students get labeled with disabilities when it's largely a function of behavior issues or under-resourced lack of opportunities. And so sorting through what's disability and what's poverty is a tricky question. But that kind of smooth partnership, I think, makes this much more doable, because the district is used to trusting SU, not always, but at least for the most part, trusting SU because they've been in partnerships before. The other side of the coin, which might be seen as a negative motivation for what turned into a positive relationship, is that we were doing what every higher education institution does. We were doing a million different projects in the city schools. Some from the School of Education, some from our STEM, scientists and engineers doing technology work in the schools, some from our artists. So we were all over the schools. And I remember the superintendent who came in about the same time I came in, sitting down and saying, Nancy, we love SU students and faculty, but we're really tired of, they get a grant, they come in, they want to do this project, then the grant runs out and they're nowhere to be found, and we've got teachers and students who are left holding the bag, if you will. So they were looking for us to consolidate, not just within the School of Ed, because the Say Yes partnership involves students and faculty from all over campus, but to consolidate in an organized approach. And then I'm a board member of the American Institutes for Research, and at the time, another board member was Mary Ann Schmidt-Carey, who later went to be the president of Say Yes to Education Foundation in New York City. And when I bumped into her later on, after she had gone to Say Yes, she said, Nancy, we're looking for a city in New York State where we could scale up to a whole district. And New York State had just at that time finished the campaign for fiscal equity, and it was actually going to fund these under-resourced districts. That, of course, has gone by the wayside. But at the time, there was optimism for that. And I said to her, Mary Ann, do I have a city for you? So she came, and I'll never forget that meeting. She came, the teachers' union. We brought the teachers' union right from the start because we knew they could kill it if they wanted to. And they've been wonderful. So this is not a. And the superintendent and the dean of education and I sat down, and we said, what would this look like? And we all agreed that Syracuse was, in some ways, a perfect place to do it, because it's a big enough school district that if this thing works, it's a real national model, but it's a small enough school district. I had worked in Detroit when I was in Michigan and in Chicago when I was at Illinois, and you just can't get your hands around those districts. I mean, you can to some degree, but so we all agreed there was some real hope, because 21,000 kids, you had a chance of reaching all 21,000 kids. And then we started to just really try to work the politics of it, and the new mayor and the county executive, one a Democrat, one a Republican, came together totally over this project and really pooled their resources for the first time in the history of the county and the city. And so what we're seeing now is that what began as an education reform project is now really an economic development project for the city, and it's bringing together people that, neighborhood activists who would never talk to the mayor are now sitting at the community advisory board for Say Yes. And I didn't go into detail, but we have all kinds of boards and advising, this. So I think much as your experience is, it does bring people together. And we've been trying to convince, to no avail, but we've been trying to convince Albany that that really the model of education funding in New York State, and it's probably true in other states as well, it is not going to work because it's a kind of peanut butter model. You know, you just spread it all evenly across, you know, all districts. So I talked to the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, and he says, I can't give you that for Syracuse because then I'd have to give it to Long Island. You know, I said, why would you give it to Long Island? I mean, and the, you know, what I try to say to him is, and I deeply believe, for this period in American history, education is economic development. And when we think of economic development, even New York State, when it funds economic development, funds demonstration projects. I mean, they do that all the time. So why can't you fund a district that is so patently an under-resourced district? Well, anyway, we're making this happen without their funding, but we hope it will survive. So.
Chancellor.
Dr. Cantor, I've joined Mayor Dupuy in commending you and the university upon all the projects that you have going in the community. It's very impressive. On the matter of elementary and secondary education, earlier today I was talking to a member of a school board here in the area, and it's a troubled district. There's no question about it. And I asked her jokingly, do you ever get a call at 11:30 at night from someone thanking you for your service on the school board? Of course, intending,
Right.
no, that doesn't happen.
That's for sure.
She gave a disturbing reply, though, to my teasing question. The reply was, I never get any calls. I never get any calls. She says the parents don't seem to care. And of course, then, because she's smart and very insightful, she said, we're dealing, of course, with fractured families. We're dealing with kids that come from homes in which there is no reading material at all. We're dealing with children who have no contact with a father or with a male role model. We're dealing with kids that are bereft of any home-based support system that places a emphasis upon the critical importance of education. And in education reform, we can do a lot with the kids in the schools once they're there, and I do not mean to diminish that at all. But in your experience at Syracuse, what can be done on the other end?
So I think that's just beautifully said and extremely important. So one of the reasons that the Say Yes to Education model is a comprehensive model is precisely because the notion is that these students are not just isolated in school, in classrooms, that really their educational experience has to be embedded in the full ecology, if you will, of home and neighborhood, of the side effects of poverty, of all the things we know. So we spend as much time in this Say Yes campaign, if you will, and it really is a campaign now, with families and in community centers and in community-based organizations where kids will end up, and in the legal system and in the healthcare system, as we do in curricular revision. So you've got to have the curricular revision, or at the end of the day, this won't work. But you really need to embed it within the family systems and the neighborhood systems. And one of the things that I like to say, I'm not sure I said it really today, is that if you take something like the Near West Side Initiative and you take Say Yes, they are working side by side. So the elementary school that's across from 601 Tully that we're redoing, that I showed you, is the elementary school that Say Yes is in. I mean, we're in all the elementary schools. So there's really a lot of intersection between the neighborhood sense of agency we're building in the neighborhood and what's happening in Say Yes. They're all the same people that are, and that's very important. Because the other side of the notion that your school board person's had about fractured families, et cetera, is that there's a lot of, I think, understandable distrust of all of us in this, right? And so to make this thing work, you have to build tremendous networks of trust on the ground. And that's why it really is critical that you're not just doing school reform in the schools. You're really working comprehensively in the neighborhood. And that's really what we've been doing. We purposely rolled out Say Yes quadrant by quadrant, which is really neighborhood by neighborhood, so that we could make sure that we had the right neighborhood associations behind it, so that the churches in each neighborhood are playing very critical parts of this. So we have the pastors doing really marketing work, if you will, for Say Yes in all of their congregations. And we have, we do a lot of the screening on health insurance and all of that in churches and in the neighborhood. So some of what I'm calling Say Yes, and it is part of the Say Yes model, is really not what traditional school reform people would be concentrating on. And it's for precisely the reasons that you outlined.
Excellent, thank you.
Nancy, let me thank you again for being here, for leaving 2 feet of snow to come to a 60-degree weather. But really, this was so informative for us and so important for us at this time in Baylor's history. And we'll be around for a little while with some refreshments and folks. I think Chancellor Cantor would have some time to talk to a few of you before she needs to get out. Before we go, we have a Texas-sized gift for you.
Which we'll send to you.
We will send to you. It is, if it's right, it is a ceramic piece done by one of our Ceramiston residents. So it's a special piece for you from Baylor. So again, thank you very much for being here.